Alright, welcome back to another episode of the Cody Tucker Show. As always, I'm your host, Cody Tucker. Be sure to like and subscribe, share with a friend, all that stuff. So I've been just thinking a lot lately about how with having just an insane amount of anxiety, which I know I talk about this a lot, but oh well. I have been really regretting the fact that I didn't try more drugs. Whenever because there was a time in my life where I would have tried anything. And I don't know what made me think of this. I guess I've been listening to a lot of the Grateful Dead lately, which never in a million years would I have thought I would have gotten into this band. I've tried, I almost look at it as Game of Thrones, because the more people told me I should watch Game of Thrones, the more I despised everything about the fucking show until I watched it. And I mean, I will say it took me a couple of times to just be like, I can't fucking do this. And then it was maybe the third or fourth time that I tried watching it where I got super into it. The Grateful Dead has been the very same for me. I obviously knew of their music and knew some songs, but the whole idea of being a deadhead and just following this fucking band around, it never made sense to me whenever I actually listened to the music. I was like, how in the fuck would people just follow this and listen to this shit for hours? And out of nowhere, I guess just from Sirius XM and having that Grateful Dead channel, I've gotten super into it. We'll say I've eaten in my lifetime probably a combined total of 6 gallons of Cherry Garcia ice cream. So maybe that makes me an honorary deadhead. I don't know. But, yeah, I mean, I've just been listening to, all of their live albums, which you can find them all on, Spotify, Apple, whatever. And they are fucking incredible. So I don't know, and I haven't had this happen to me in a long time, where I've hated something for a really long time, and then it just clicked where now I like it. It happened a lot as a kid because I would hate a lot of the music my parents listened to, and then just out of nowhere be like, damn, I kind of do like Leonard Skinner. That's the main one I can think of. Journey also, where I just hate it. And Foreigner's another one where I just fucking hated these bands as a kid because, it would just get driven into my goddamn brain. Every time my parents would be with other family members getting loose, would always end up hearing Jukebox Hero. And boy did it get on my nerves. And yeah, now all that shit I'm super into. But yeah, the Grateful Dead is for sure the most recent version of that for me. I have just gotten so into it. And the more I've listened to it, the more I've realized that doing drugs is a big big part of being a Grateful Dead fan. The same way that clear alcohols mixed into just sugar-filled cocktails is the only way you can really enjoy Jimmy Buffett's music. Which I mean I have not gotten into that point. My God, which I don't even drink anymore, so I think the window of opportunity for being a Jimmy Buffett fan, or was it called God, what does he call his fans? Oh shit, there's a name for it. Parrot heads. How fucking stupid is that? But yeah, I mean the window of opportunity for me becoming a parrot head, I think, is long gone. But I guess there is hope because I don't do drugs, I don't smoke weed, don't do acid, but have become a Grateful Dead fan. Now, I mean, would I go follow them around? Fuck no. Because I mean, I'm going to sound like a 1950s dad right now, but I fucking hate hippies. I mean, I don't think anyone has said that out loud in probably 50 years. But, in high school, like being obsessed with old Jimbo over here and like all the like 60s counterculture stuff, I was just so fascinated with like the hippie movement, Woodstock, Monterey Pop, obviously like the Doors, Big Brother and the Holding Company, Hendrix, like all this music that's kind of synonymous with, that era, the Mamas and the Papas, Jefferson Airplane, and I always thought it would be so fucking cool to have been in like San Francisco in 1967, Summer of Love, Haight-Ashbury. And the more I've gotten older, the more I've just realized how smelly it must have all been, which I have a thing about smells. I think most fat people do if they have any kind of fucking self-respect, or even any respect for other people. Like if you're fat, you know that the chances of you, like if you're a fat person, as I am, the chances of you smelling like shit are astronomically higher than a skinny person. Ergo, you have to be real vigilant about keeping your shit maintained. And I mean, so I'm constantly deodorant, lotion that smells good, little spritzes of cologne, but nothing fucking crazy. I mean, goddamn, I'm not fucking Persian, but like I definitely put a lot, and I shower fucking all the time. And then when the summer months kick in, Jesus Christ, like I'll leave places to go back home and take a shower. Like if I think shit's starting to ripen up a little bit, which honestly doesn't take much. Like, and I sweat a lot just naturally. So all of these things combined creates just a stinky fucking person. And so I think if you are a fat ass, you definitely have to put a lot of time and care into smelling good. And just me being sensitive to smells, I'm kind of glad that I am, because like I don't end up having to be just a straight nuisance to everyone else. Because like I'm going to know if I smell bad way before you're going to know it. So you're welcome. But that being said, being surrounded by, like, I used to think if I could go back in time in a time machine and see one event, in my head it was always Woodstock. Like, I want to go to Woodstock, see, all these bands, see like all the people. The more I think about it now, the more I realize that it would have been the most miserable fucking time of my life. One, it was muddy as shit. So everybody's getting rained on. So there's already it's like 4 days. So or 3 days, I guess. There's already this like fucking mildew, nasty, just that smell of like rain in a field. And then on top of that, just a shitload of mud. As far as I know, the public bathroom situation was not great. So there's a good chance, a good percentage of that mud was human caca. And mix that in with just the hippie smell of just sweat and fucking hair that's like curdled. God, there is no ounce of me that wants to have been around any of that. So, back to original point, traveling around and seeing the Grateful Dead to me is just the modern version. It's the continuation of that disgusting caveman shit. Which, God, like not a big fan of homeless people. Maybe that's sorry, not sorry. Maybe I should be more philanthropic, but fuck, if I'm broke, how the fuck am I going to be philanthropic? Anyways, And the main reason why I don't like homeless people isn't just the way I kind of look at homeless people is the way that somebody might, like somebody whenever you talk to somebody who's afraid of birds, it's the reason, same like logic of why they're afraid of birds. One is that they shit everywhere and they're super unpredictable. May or may not peck your eyes out. All of these three things can perfectly be lined up with the mentality of a hobo. And it scares the shit out of me. But the number one reason why I don't like, the transients or transient is just the smell. Like every time that a homeless person that I've gotten close enough to like, which I have given homeless people money before. I mean, I'm not like fucking Scrooge. Now I've become much more Scrooge-like. But there were times where, like, you kind of get cornered by a couple of them, and you're like, oh, Jesus, how do I get out of this situation? So you just throw some change on the ground, and when they get down to reach, you haul ass. But the fucking smell that comes off of your standard hobo is whoa. And, so that, am I a shit person? Probably. I have contended with that my entire life. And there are things that I would like to change about said shit personality, and there are things that I just accept are going to be part of my life forever. My just overall disdain and disgust for street hobos will, I think, always be there. And the more common it's gotten, the more I'm going to fucking hate it. Now, I wish, obviously, there's a much bigger story with that, and, we probably shouldn't have the homeless problem that we have. Most of these people should be in some sort of psychiatric care. They shouldn't be on the streets. But until that happens, I am fucking keeping windows rolled up and looking straight ahead. Like they're fucking I'm looking at it like they're zombies, and that's what I got to do. I don't think I'm alone on this, too. I think most people probably do think the way I'm thinking. They just don't want to say it because they don't want to sound like an asshole. I am pretty damn used to sounding like an asshole, so, I mean, what can I do? But yeah, so, and really the Grateful Dead fans are basically just homeless people who have figured out a way to, like, make it into a Grateful Dead concert. That being said, becoming a big fan of the Grateful Dead. Yeah. But also, to kind of go back to what I was talking about even before that, I wish that, like, my anxiety wasn't at a level where it has been for a long-ass time. Because I would like to try getting high as shit and listening to the Grateful Dead. Like, the more I've listened to them, the more I'm like, God, I would like to be high right now. And I have such a weak fucking, what do you call it? Like, I mean, a weak brain in general, but like, my ability to maintain, as the stoners like to say, God, I sound like a real fucking square. I think the more I'm talking right now, the more I'm sounding like I am a fucking preppy kid from the 50s. Jesus. A Sosha, if you will. Oh well. But I have a very limited ability to maintain if I get high. And therefore, don't do it. I in the past, I would say in the past maybe 5 years, maybe even longer. Yeah, let's say past 5 years I've been high twice. And one was a very small version of it where I took like a couple hits. And man, it just takes every fucking ounce of me not to just drive myself to the emergency room anytime I get high. So, and that's just from smoking weed. I can't imagine just the shit show that would happen if I tried dropping acid. I mean, my God, it would be like any of those stories you hear of like the bad shit that happens to people who are on acid that people will say to try to keep their kids from doing acid, like, oh, this person thought a light bulb was candy, ate it, and died. And people are like, oh, that's probably bullshit. It wouldn't be bullshit if I did acid. All of those things, jumping off of a roof, jumping out of a window, thinking that there's bugs inside my skin and skinning myself to death. I would probably do a little bit of every one of those things if I were to drop acid. But there is still just a huge part of me that wants to do it so bad. That wants to like do mushrooms, and I know from, oh, fuck. I know that, from a decently clinical perspective, there could be, I could benefit quite a bit from doing mushrooms. Like the psilocybin treatments and all of these things that have, have been well proven to help in some way with anxiety. But, I mean, I don't know that it would help. Like, how the fuck, if the biggest anxiety causing thought to me is tripping balls, then how the fuck do I get over that in order to take the thing that may make me trip balls, but also help me get rid of the anxiety that is caused by the idea of tripping balls? It is a cycle that would leave me fucking drooling. Like I'm going fucking cross-eyed just thinking about the cycle of tripping balls, anxiety, get rid of anxiety, trip balls, have anxiety, trip ball. Like, it is, I think this is a pretty good indicator of how my brain works. So, you're welcome. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I could ever do it. So part of it is like I regret not doing a lot of these things. Fuck, what the fuck am I yawning? I regret like not trying acid, not trying shrooms. Well, I did try shrooms twice. Nothing happened. Not really. I mean, I took such a very small amount that all that happened was like tingly, basically feeling like my foot was numb, like my foot was asleep, but my body felt like that. I didn't see anything, which, I mean, I don't know how much you're supposed to take for that to happen. I definitely didn't take that amount, clearly. So like I almost don't even, most of the time I don't even remember that I've done mushrooms, like when someone asks. But I've never done acid, never done, any of that kind of stuff. DMT, God, is out of the question. Fuck no. Like, I want to try to fucking live in this world. I damn sure don't want to get launched off into another fucking dimension for 15 minutes. Like, I'm having a hard time just being, here. Oh my God. And my worry is that it's going to stick. That, like, I'm going to go. God damn it. My worry is that I'm going to go into that world and not come back out. or just start having like I already feel like my grasp of reality, it's got a little slickness to it. Like it's not completely slippery, but it's pretty damn close. So I'm already having to kind of, keep my wits about me just to maintain here. But God, I wish I would have done, and maybe I will one day. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll just get so fucking fed up with that, being a little anxious bitch, that I'll say, you know what? Give me a fucking handful of shrooms and lock me in a closet. Put on Grateful Dead live at Cornell University, 1977, and I will just see where the fuck I end up. That is definitely probably more of a possibility than I think. But like also, drugs are kind of just a young person's thing. Like, like, I would also tend to live vicariously. So, I would do this really in lots of ways. But, like, with things that were bad, so like drugs or committing crimes, whatever, I would just read about people doing it, and that intrigue would be wiped out because, like, I could live vicariously through, like, I would read Hunter S. Thompson a lot and became fucking obsessed with Hunter Thompson and, like, his whole gonzo world, like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, all those things. And so it kind of, like, satiated the need to do a fuckload of drugs. Obviously, it didn't help with alcohol. Alcohol was hitting me full force. But, all the heavier shit, like I was not about to huff a bunch of ether. Like, I'll just read about Hunter Thompson doing it. I get to hear what it's like, and there it is. I've experienced enough of it that I need to. Which is good for bad things, because then you don't have to do it. You don't commit a crime. You get to, hear what it's like from someone else. And, there you go. Intrigue is over. But I also do that with shit that's, like, good. Like, instead of wanting to go to Paris, I'll just watch a documentary about Paris and be like, well, that's good enough. But that isn't. That's a bullshit, like, real little bitch mentality to have. But I, would read all this, like, Hunter Thompson shit and just desperately want to try a fuckload of drugs, like do coke. Like, I always thought, like, doing, like, as a, younger male, thought doing coke sounded fucking awesome. And it looked cool in the movies. Like I would watch Boogie Nights all the time, and, like, I would want to be like Roller Girl, like can I call you mom? Like, it was kind of just like shit that I was fascinated by, but would never do it, and 100% would never do it now. But then also, again, to the point of, like, it being for younger people, like, I was heavily obsessed with Hunter S. Thompson. And thought, like, man, that guy lived, like, the best fucking life. Like, he did whatever the fuck he wanted, went out the way he wanted to go out. And now that I'm, like, maybe just, I don't know if I'm wiser. I mean, I'm still young as fuck, so I'm probably really stupid in a lot of ways. But definitely, the more removed I am from that, the more I realize, like, he was probably fucking insufferable to be around. Like, as cool as Hunter S. Thompson seems like he was, God, he was probably, I would have hated being around him. Like, I would have hated being like, oh, we're going to go to the fucking, we're going to go watch a football game. And then meanwhile, this fucker has just laced my Heineken with fucking mescaline. He's like, oh, we're about to see some shit now, man. Like, fuck that. But that's, like, I imagine that's the world you're living in if you're hanging out with Hunter Thompson. Is that you could be eating breakfast with him, and he's like, hey, how does your eggs taste? You're like, good. He's like, are you feeling anything? Like, no. You're about to. And then meanwhile, this fucker has just sprinkled peyote all over your goddamn scrambled eggs. That's what I imagine hanging out with Hunter Thompson is like. And now, thinking about it, I am so glad I am not of that world. And maybe I'm just sounding like a boring dude, which in a lot of ways I am. But I would much rather be boring than just be... I mean, to be going at 100 all the time like that, fuck no. I mean, obviously he couldn't handle it because he put a handful of lead right through his fucking dome. So, there's that. But, all right. So to move on from this, maybe one day I'll do acid. Maybe I'll even do it on a podcast. Try to get, more than fucking 20 views on an episode. But time to start talking about the fun shit. Got 3 fucking fascinating stories to go through that involve, let's say, American icons, just famous people of, somewhat recent U.S. history and somewhat older U.S. history. Doesn't matter. Either way, it involves the children of legends. That's probably the best way to put it. So, without further ado, let's go through some stories of the old Did You Know segment. So, first story is the curse of Robert Todd Lincoln. If you don't know who Robert Todd Lincoln is, he was the son of President Abraham Lincoln. Obviously don't have to go into too much detail about Abraham Lincoln, but we all know the story. On April 15th, 1865, Abraham Lincoln is in Ford's Theater watching a play. A man by the name of John Wilkes Booth makes his way up to the booth where, in the balcony where Abe is sitting with, I believe, Ulysses S. Grant. I might be wrong about that. I can't remember who he's all with, but he's with some people. Fuck it. John Wilkes Booth, massive fan of the South. Big fan of the Confederacy. So, ergo, not a fan of Abraham Lincoln. Shoots Abraham Lincoln point blank in the back of the head, jumps off the balcony, lands on the stage, breaks his leg, shouts, Sic Semper Tyrannis, which I think means to death of all tyrants or something like that. Runs out the theater, gets captured later on. But it's all part of this conspiracy to kill Abraham Lincoln. Because even though Abraham Lincoln, arguably one of the greatest presidents of all time, the bottom half of the country fucking hated his guts. So, he went out the way that, the Julius Caesar way, the Kennedy way, that people who make a big impact usually rub a lot of people the wrong way. So, Abraham Lincoln shot his son, Robert Todd Lincoln, not even a month later. This, to me, is one of the craziest coincidences in history. So, also, to give just a little bit of backup, John Wilkes Booth was a somewhat well-known actor of the time, and was the brother of arguably one of the most famous actors of his time. His brother's name was Edwin Booth, so it's basically if Billy Baldwin had shot Bill Clinton in the 90s. That's basically John Wilkes Booth's level compared to his brother Edwin, who would be obviously the Alec Baldwin. Even though way more likely for Alec Baldwin to shoot someone. So John Wilkes Booth escapes. All that shit happens. Less than a month later, Robert Todd Lincoln, the, I believe, youngest son of Abraham Lincoln, is getting onto a train. Standing at the train station, about to get onto the train cart, slips and falls, or starts to fall, which he would have fucking died. A person grabs his arm, pulls him back, saves him. The person who pulled his arm back to save him was Edwin Booth, brother of John Wilkes Booth, who less than a month before that fucking killed his dad. Which is mind-blowing. That is, I think one of the craziest coincidences ever in history. But it is not even close to the end of the Robert Todd Lincoln curse. So Robert Todd Lincoln, dad, president, dies. Later, he becomes the Secretary of War, or Secretary of Defense. Let me see. I think I have this written down. Secretary of War for James Garfield, which in a previous episode, I remember James Garfield as the person who was assassinated by former member of creepy sex cult Charles Guiteau. Charles Guiteau shot and killed President James Garfield. What I didn't say is that standing right next to James Garfield was Secretary of War Robert Todd Lincoln. So Robert Todd Lincoln, dad is shot, president. Becomes Secretary of War, witnesses right next to him another president get assassinated. Which you would think at this point, you'd say, fuck politics, I'm never going to meet or hang out with another president ever in my life. And you would be wrong. Later, Robert Todd Lincoln is kind of removed from politics. He's like, I'm not getting into this shit anymore. But he becomes, I think, like, kind of high up in, like, this railroad company. And they are doing the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. And so he says, fuck it, like, we'll go to that and check it out. So he goes to Buffalo, and when he is in Buffalo, President William McKinley is in Buffalo. President William McKinley gets assassinated by this fucking anarchist radical, which I always fucking can't seem to pronounce his name correctly, so I'm not even going to try. But I believe he was Polish. So Robert Todd Lincoln, dad, Abraham Lincoln, assassinated. Becomes Secretary of War, standing next to James Garfield. He gets assassinated. A couple years later, goes to Buffalo, New York to see the Pan American Exposition. William McKinley's there. He gets assassinated. So, yeah, Robert Todd Lincoln is, I mean, my God, what a fucking bad omen that dude was. I mean, poor fucking bastard. So that's the curse of Robert Todd Lincoln. So the next that we'll go through is so everyone, I should think, knows the Rockefeller family. Rockefeller family, arguably the most powerful family in American history. I don't even think anybody even comes close. The Rockefeller family, the patriarch of family, was a guy named John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller guy grew up decently poor, but highly motivated, and happened to kind of be at the right place at the right time during the oil boom of the late 1800s, early 1900s. And just started had like a little oil, derrick set up, I believe in Texas, and just started buying out all these oil. Just started using his money to buy more and more and more and more and more. And with the advent and popularization of the automobile, became, like oil became a fucking necessity. Whereas before then, not really that much oil needed. But with Henry Ford creating the Model T, and obviously lots of other examples of automobiles, but those specifically being just mass produced and like more economical, John D. Rockefeller becomes a guy that profits greatly. So much so that by 1913, John D. Rockefeller, who owns this company called Standard Oil, becomes the richest human being on the planet. So much money that his personal wealth made up 3% of the U.S.'s GDP. So 3% of all the money in the fucking country was John D. Rockefeller's money. That is insane. That's one person who has 3% of an entire country. And not just it's not fucking, Luxembourg. It's goddamn America. And so that money, that amount of money that he had, would be the equivalent to $500 billion in today's money. John D. Rockefeller is arguably the richest person ever to live, at least in modern society. There's arguments that Julius Caesar's wealth was over $1 trillion, but a lot of that is kind of hard to fucking really document, because they're usually using the wealth of places that he conquered, which mean, I don't know how that really makes it his wealth as much as it is like just Roman wealth. John D. Rockefeller's money is his fucking money. Like, that's his shit. His company, Standard Oil. And it ends up becoming, under Teddy Roosevelt, one of the, till Roosevelt and then Taft, and ends up becoming busted as a monopoly when all these, like, you know, the trust busting was happening. It was like the Antitrust Act or whatever. So John D. Rockefeller, even with the shit getting split up, is still massively wealthy. So he ends up having a son. So John D. Rockefeller's not the person that has like necessarily the crazy fucking interesting story. It's a little bit further down the line. So John D. Rockefeller, but just trying to set up backstory here. John D. Rockefeller has a son named J.D. Jr., John D. Rockefeller Jr. Not that much interesting about him. He was some would say a philanthropist, but really he was just going around the world and just stealing people's shit. But giving the people there some stuff too, so he didn't seem like just a monster. John D. Rockefeller Jr. has a son named Nelson Rockefeller. Nelson Rockefeller is the grandson of John D. Rockefeller. Nelson Rockefeller gets like heavily involved in politics and becomes starts working under Franklin Roosevelt. He ends up getting fired by Truman. Is working like alongside the CIA. Like all this stuff is, you know, pretty heavily involved in politics, especially during like the 40s, 50s. Then becomes the governor of New York. As governor of New York, fucking pretty well-liked human being. And even by today's standards, like, seemed like a pretty fucking good politician. He was a Republican, which, I mean, most people think means that they're a fucking, just an outright piece of shit. But, you know, 1950s, 60s Republican is a hell of a lot different than today's. He was, as governor of New York, like, tried really hard to repeal the ban on abortion. Dude was very fucking progressive. Even by, like, today's standards. Pretty fucking progressive dude. He wanted abortion to be readily available for women, especially if there was, like, you know, instances of, like, rape and incest, or especially if there was going to be issues with the fetus and or mother. That's a pretty fucking big jump forward, you know, for that time. He also made the prohibition against racial discrimination for housing, which ain't nobody fucking fighting for that in the 1960s, especially like early 60s. But Nelson Rockefeller did. So dude, actually pretty decent guy. He ends up becoming vice president under Gerald Ford. But basically through, I mean, the Gerald Ford story is a whole other thing, but Gerald Ford was never elected vice president or president. He's the only person to have ever been president who wasn't elected to president or vice president. He got that shit just by luck, being at the right place at the right time. I mean, he became the vice president because Spiro Agnew resigned, so Gerald Ford just automatically became, which, I mean, I know you're not elected to vice president, but he wasn't like the original vice president. I mean, I guess in a way you do elect a vice president because they are on the ticket. But, so then he becomes vice president, then Nixon resigns, and just gets shoehorned in as the fucking president. Gerald Ford arguably suffered from an insane amount of CTE, was a bit of a jackass, but Nelson Rockefeller, vice president, seemed like a pretty good dude. Nelson Rockefeller ends up leaving politics. It's like, I'm done with this shit. As good of a dude as Nelson Rockefeller seemed like he was, he had a love of the ladies. So much so that it led to the old fucker's demise. And about 2 years after he left the vice presidency, he was in like his, you know, secondary home with one of his aides. I believe it was a secretary named Megan Marshak. Let me see. I think I wrote this down too. Hold on. God damn it. Megan Marshak. So he is at this home alone with said aide, Miss Marshak. He is there alone with her because he's banging the shit out of her, cheating on his wife with this much younger person. He's like 70. When he, arrives, ejaculates, he has a massive fucking coronary. Big old heart attack, infarction, dies, croaks right on her. I mean, I might be adding some to that. But yes, he has a heart attack while having sex with his mistress and dies. And it's pretty much covered up by the Rockefellers, who, again, richest family in the country. So newspapers basically print whatever the fuck they want them to. And their whole thing was basically, that he just had a heart attack. They did not mention him banging his secretary. But, so all this shit is leading up to the fucking wild story of a man named Michael Rockefeller. Michael Rockefeller is the son of Nelson. So you have Nelson, who, vice president, governor of New York, dies fucking his secretary. His son, Michael, who is the great-grandson of John D. So you got big old John D at the top. That's the first guy in the Rockefeller patriarch. Or, patrilineal, just line of fucking rich motherfuckers. John D. Rockefeller, number one. Down to grandson Nelson, great-grandson Michael. Michael Rockefeller was like a college athlete, wrestling team, went to Harvard, bit of an anthropologist, loved studying cultures. He started making these trips to, at the time, I believe was Dutch Papua New Guinea, or, the Netherlands, New Guinea. But we know it now, I think, as Papua New Guinea. And started doing these, basically like voyage, meetings with the Asmat tribe. So he goes to Papua New Guinea to meet with the Asmat tribe, who he's basically studying, trying to learn their culture. And they seem to really enjoy him being there. Like it's not like a weird fucking, it's not a, like a colonization type thing. It's an anthropological, research type thing where he just wants to see what this culture is like and try not to fuck with them. And they seem to enjoy the guy. Don't really mind him being there. He comes like every once in a while. Well, in 1961, he comes back to Papua New Guinea. He is in his canoe with two guides and his friend. The canoe, they are about 20 miles, I believe, off the shores of Papua New Guinea. And the canoe capsizes in pretty rough water. The two guides say, well, fuck these honkies. We're swimming to shore. And they swim to shore. Michael and his friend are under the impression that they're going to go get help. They don't. They're like, peace, bitch. Good luck. And Michael and his friend are basically out to sea for a good minute. And at this time, they've kind of floated a little closer to shore. They're about 14 miles from shore. And Michael says, look, I mean, I'm in decent shape. They're not coming back for us. It ain't happening. I'll swim to shore and get someone to help us. So, Michael swims to shore. What happened to Michael Rockefeller is not 100% known. But he didn't make it. Now, there's one argument that he died from exhaustion on the swim. There is another theory that he was eaten by either a saltwater crocodile or a shark. The crazier theory, but is also the theory that has decent circumstantial evidence, so obviously it's not 100% proven, but fuck it, it's an awesome story, and it actually may be the truth. Michael Rockefeller made it to shore and was met by not the Asmat tribe, but a completely different tribe, because where the boat most likely had, capsized, and just where he probably got led to, completely different shore in Papua New Guinea. He did not make it to where the Asmat tribe was, who would have 100% helped him out and taken care of him. He instead was met by this other tribe, a way more brutal, vicious tribe who hated white people because they had just recently, like 3 years before that, gotten into like a bit of a skirmish with the Dutch. Not big fans of white people, and also known cannibals, known headhunters. Well, the story that, I mean, actually most people think is probably the truth is that Michael made it to shore, was met by this tribe, immediately killed and eaten by said tribe. And the reason why there is some kind of weight to that claim is that there have been quite a few people who have gone back to the island, especially like recent after. I mean, you remember this dude is the heir to a fucking fortune. I mean, he's the son of a vice president. So, like, or at the time, not vice president, I believe just governor. I think Nelson Rockefeller at the time was just governor of New York. Nelson Rockefeller ran for president in 1960, 64, and 68. Became vice president during Ford, so like 72, I guess. But yeah, I believe this is when Nelson Rockefeller was vice president. So the son of the vice president of New York State is fucking missing. And nobody knows what happened to him. So people do start going to the island, to Papua New Guinea, and like investigating, like, what the fuck happened to him? Like, where is he? And there's a few people who make it to the island who, when they're interviewing the Asmat tribe, don't know what the fuck happened to him. But then, because they weren't there at the time whenever he, his last voyage. But there's some people who say, well, let's go interview some of the other tribes around here. And when they do, they meet the tribe who supposedly found him. And when they do, some of them are wearing his clothes. That's according to the guy who, or, well, not just one person, but multiple people who went, is that they were wearing Western clothes that looked an awful lot like the clothes that Michael Rockefeller was wearing. There was also a skull that had been used in a ceremony that was decently fresh and was most likely Michael Rockefeller's skull. So it's now whether he died and just washed up to shore and they, kept his skull for some reason, that could be a thing. But so that was like a lot of people's argument was that, yeah, but that doesn't mean they ate him. But according to a few different people who met that tribe, they said they ate him. They said, we killed that motherfucker and he is gone. Still, though, no one knows what the fuck really happened to him. There have even been some pictures that have resurfaced, or that have surfaced, in recent years, where you see that tribe, and there's a fucking white person with them who looks an awful lot like Michael Rockefeller. Like, when you look at pictures of Michael Rockefeller, picture him with a beard, and it looks like this motherfucker. I'll put a picture up of it. But, so there's some people who think that he stayed with that tribe, or that he, was with that tribe for a while and then ended up making his way to where the Asmat tribe was because he, had become friendly with the people in that tribe and just lived out the rest of his life with the Asmat tribe. Papua New Guinea is not a highly, visited place. So it is, it's not a crazy notion to think that a person could live with this tribe and people wouldn't have known about it. It's just crazy to think that it was the son, great-grandson of the richest human being in history and the son of a governor/vice president. But that's the story of Michael Rockefeller. And before I go, I'll add one more story that is associated with the Rockefellers because, as decent of a guy as Nelson Rockefeller seemed like he was, even though he did die fucking his mistress, and as decent of a person as Michael Rockefeller seemed, just really fucking naive, probably should have stayed his ass in New York. As good as they seem, as it is the case with most insanely wealthy families, there's usually a little bit of fuckery going on. And that is just as prevalent with the Rockefellers. And there's a lot of fucking examples of them just doing some real shady shit involving money, war, like getting really involved in war, taking shit from people. suppress, like John D. Rockefeller definitely had a lot of people killed who were trying to, do like labor strikes. There's some shady shit that happened with the Rockefellers. One of them that I think is the most fucking nuts is that the Rockefellers owned this organization called the Rockefeller Institute, which is like did mostly like hospital work, medical research, stuff like that. One of the things that the Rockefeller Institute did is that they helped sponsor Joseph Mengele, that Nazi angel of death, helped sponsor Joseph Mengele's experiments during the Holocaust. That's not good. I mean, good luck, justifying that. So that's one of the things they did, is that they were basically sending money to Joseph Mengele, the angel of death, in basically trade with them getting his research findings. Which really, the motherfucker didn't find anything. There are people who, I would argue, maybe a little too nice on the Nazis, who think that Joseph Mengele, actually a lot of things that we know about medicine happened because of those experiments. No, it isn't. We really didn't learn shit from Joseph Mengele. We learned that people tend to die whenever they have their, stomach cut out. We learned that adult Siamese twins, when they get cut in half, usually don't survive. That's about all we learned. We also learned that if you inject dye into a person's eyes, they don't permanently change color. They tend to just become blind. So, yeah, I mean, he didn't really discover shit. But the Rockefellers, and the researchers at the Rockefeller Institute thought that, hey, this motherfucker's probably going to learn some shit and keep it secret under Nazi Germany. We would sure like to get our hands on this research. Let's, send him money to help fund his research. He sends us the results. So that's not good. They were also heavily into eugenics. One of the people who was also heavily into eugenics, kind of in the early stages of the Rockefeller Institute, and didn't necessarily work with the Rockefeller Institute, but was kind of supportive of their eugenics, their, support of eugenics, was Helen Keller, which is wild for a deaf, blind, and dumb person. Basically, Tommy, for that person to be in favor of eugenics, which, in case you don't know, is the idea of basically not allowing certain people to breed because they are undesirable. Usually it was people who had a mental disability or, something like that. But yeah, so the Rockefeller Institute, highly in favor of eugenics. They also, I believe this was maybe in the 30s or 40s, they were doing basically research on the flu, on influenza, and wanted to kind of test basically we're testing flu vaccines, early flu vaccines, and wanted to test the results, see what would happen if somebody had the flu and took these different vaccines, whether they worked, blah, blah, blah. Well, what they did was they just lined people up at this institute, mostly vagrants, people with disabilities, stuff like that, and said they were giving them a different immunization, and instead were taking a hard, strong dose of the flu and just shooting it into their nose, giving them the flu, monitoring them for a while. Quite a few of them died, but the ones who didn't, they would then give them the flu vaccine, and then there was other things where they would administer the flu vaccine, then administer the flu. They were basically just testing the flu, testing vaccines. It was super dangerous to do that back then. To just inject people with the flu. which I know now, flu isn't anything crazy, but like back then wasn't great. I mean, medicine was not where it is now. The flu could pretty well fuck you up. One of the people who we now know was heavily involved in these trials was a man named Jonas Salk. Jonas Salk is considered, one of the greatest people in medical history. He invented the polio vaccine. Didn't patent it so that it could be super affordable, super cheap, and he wouldn't make a dime off of it. So that story, people think, with the polio vaccine, oh, this guy is this, fucking amazing human being. And, in many ways probably was. But he also injected a lot of fucking people who didn't know what was going on, injected them with the flu. A lot of them ended up dying. So, tit for tit. This was all covered up until like a long time later. The Rockefellers, obviously having the amount of money they have, were able to keep this all under wraps. I mean, it was all kept under wraps for a while. And, now I don't even think the Rockefeller Institute really does shit. But yeah, I mean, and you could find a million other stories of them doing some pretty shady shit. Even though Nelson Rockefeller seemed like a pretty good dude, Michael seemed like a pretty good dude, and John D. Rockefeller 100% changed the world. They fucked some people up. So that's gonna be the wrap up of today's episode. Be sure to check out the Instagram, my Instagram. It's at the Cody Tucker. Check out the clips that I'll post. Follow me on TikTok. I now have a TikTok, so my privacy is completely gone. I hope you fuckers enjoy that. But that being said, that'll do it for this one. Goodbye.